As I was starting to say, my name is Deborah Hart, and I work with Jamie Timmons and Maria Piowansky and Lyman Dukes on this DD Council project. It's we're calling the speaker series. It's a 5-part series, College Matters, and this is the first of the series. So we're really excited to have you all joining us. I'm doing some. Just a brief, hopefully brief, I got to watch myself, background on what the foundation of all this work was. The purpose of our project with the council was to really explore the strategies and policies that will help grow the option of going to college for students in Florida, for students with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So we first had to identify where those programs were. Now, it's not just students with intellectual disabilities, also students with other developmental disabilities. And I'm not going to go through this whole map, but just to say, here's where they were, where we were able to find them in the year in 2018 to 19.
So we're in masks.
Yep.
We can enforce it.
People could mute their lines. That would be great. It'll minimize the background noise and make transmission much clearer. Thank you. The next step was to look at what barriers were impacting, expanding the option of going to college for students with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And the research activities on the left are the, we really took feedback from our project advisory committee, which I think some of you may be on. They really have guided the development of this project over the last 2 years. We conducted focus groups in conjunction with the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities. It was their, they were very open to having us kind of piggyback on their capacity building institute. And so we conducted focus groups, online surveys of the institutes of higher education that you saw in my prior slide. And from that, we got some key informant interviews that we conducted over the phone. And the key, whoops, my screen's being too sensitive. Let me go back. The key findings you see, I'm not going to read them to you, but you can see that most of what we found was not a surprise. And we boiled this down with the assistance of the advisory group to 2 topics. One was around students being better prepared, and the other topic was around students' support when they were at college, that students and families needed to know what would that look like and what is available. And we then were guided again from the advisory committee to develop 2 online learning modules and this 5-part speaker series. And I want to let people know that there's going to be a certificate available for those who have participated in the series in each separate one and who want to submit them for continuing education credit. That will, Jamie's going to explain at the very end of the session today a little bit more about that. Okay, I'm really excited to turn this over to Danielle Roberts-Dahm, who has agreed to do this presentation today, really looking at what are the needs of students and how to better prepare students and families for going to college. And I can't think of a better content expert than Dani is, so I'm looking forward to hearing her speak. Okay, let me stop.
Thank you, Deb.
Let me stop sharing. There you go.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And, oh, that's not the right one. Hold on. Okay. And I just want to make sure you're seeing my screen. Everything looks good. Somebody could just let me know.
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here, and I see a lot of familiar not familiar faces, but familiar names out there in Zoom land. As Deb mentioned, I'm the co-director for Project 10, and also the director for a brand new inclusive post-secondary program out of the University of South Florida, St. Petersburg campus called You Matter. And so much of this presentation is really through my role with Project 10. And 10 is an acronym for Transition Education Network. And Project 10 has been around for about 12 years. We're Florida's statewide discretionary grant project focused on secondary transition of youth with disabilities. And so we're funded by the Florida Department of Education, Bureau of Exceptional Education and Student Services, affectionately known as BEAS. And what that means to you is that everything that all the technical assistance and informational products and professional development that we provide is vetted by the Department of Ed. So it's good for you. We're never trying to sell you anything. It's vetted, healthy transition information. And in terms of our scope, we're really looking to support middle and high school educators, school district personnel, and other agencies to support that transition to college, career, life, all of the above for youth with disabilities in Florida. And because transition touches so many different facets of life, we collaborate a tremendous amount across the state and locally with different agencies like Voc Rehab and Agency for Persons with Disabilities, Centers for Independent Living, etc. Other projects, there's over 100 projects funded through the Florida Department of Education that have different specialty areas supporting students with disabilities, and families and family organizations to help promote the most positive secondary transition possible. So that's a little bit about Project 10. And we have more information later for you that we'll share on where to get more. But to get us started in the first sort of leg of this presentation, we're going to talk about preparing students for college, and then we'll focus more on parents. And I know that we have educators here. I know we have post-secondary people. I know we have some agency folks. I've seen a couple of Voc Rehab folks on. And so this information can really be applied to all of sort of those people. Just anyone supporting students with disabilities, particularly in the high school. And so in high school, services are provided to students with disabilities through the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, and services are typically provided through ESE or Exceptional Student Education, through school-based or district support. The emphasis in high school is success, so doing whatever needs to be done to help support that student to meet content standards and progress. And that may include modifying standards, which are a possibility for students with significant cognitive disabilities. In college, it's a little bit different. And so students are no longer covered under IDEA. They're actually under the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA. And that applies to everything after high school. So once a student graduates or completes all their requirements for a standard diploma, they're no longer eligible for FAPE, free and appropriate public education. And then they're in the adult world, which ADA sort of governs. So here, students have to advocate for services, and on a post-secondary campus, that usually happens through a disability services office or an accessibility services office or other types of campus administration. And then in addition to that, also advocating individually with professors and instructors to get the accommodations or things that they need. So the emphasis here in the post-secondary realm is equal access, but something important to note is that the courses, the curriculum, the standards, and course objectives cannot be modified, though accommodations may be accessed. So the next few slides are a series of questions, and this can be used, like I said, with if you're a teacher working with a student, if you're a service provider working with your client, if you're a parent or a family member working with your son, daughter, brother, sister, etc. You can kind of modify the your student to apply, because this is information that can and strategies that can be used in a variety of settings and situations. So the first one is kind of basic. Does your student understand their disability? So do they understand the nature of their disability, the impact of their disability on their learning and living? So it's with transition, it's even more than just the learning aspect, the academic aspect. It's also those life pieces. Can the student describe the supports, which could be accommodations or modifications that can assist them with learning and other aspects? And it's important to note that in college, accommodations are available, although they're not just provided. Documentation must be provided to get access to those accommodations. And not every accommodation that a student received in high school may be available in the post-secondary setting. And also modifications are not typically provided in college. And there are a couple caveats there, but typically if a student is taking a course for credit, no modifications are available. So, and really the understanding of a disability falls into that self-awareness and self-knowledge, which are components of self-determination, which we'll talk about in a bit. The next question that comes up, has your student developed effective communication and social skills with adults and peers? And so in a variety of settings, providing both instruction and guidance and also practice for students to communicate is really crucial. And communication supports the self-determination and self-advocacy skills that we'll talk about shortly. And so some examples or opportunities for students to practice communication and to provide given really clear guidance and instruction on accommodations could be self-directed IEPs, or also called student-directed IEPs. And that's also a great opportunity to just have students prepare for meetings where they'll be involved. And then also, I thought maybe a great opportunity would be communication with their voc rehab counselor. That could be email, so written communication, or phone calls and setting up meetings. And so either route would be great. And I would hope most students with disabilities in high school should be engaging with voc rehab so that they can receive some of those pre-employment transition services, also called pre-ETS. And so that communication with just, somebody that's helping to support them with their post-school goals, but maybe isn't a teacher or somebody in the school environment or at the home environment. I thought that's just a great opportunity to sort of branch out a little bit and engage students to start communicating and doing so to support their goals. There's just a little quote here about communication. I'm not going to read it to you. You've probably read it already. But I want to mention that the Do to Learn website has a social skills toolbox. So if you are an educator, that might be a great resource to design some of those social skills or communication skills lessons. So I mentioned self-determination a few times already. And so what is that? What does that mean? Self-determination is taking control and making decisions that affect one's own life. And so this is a really important piece of preparing people with disabilities, especially youth with disabilities, to run their own lives and make decisions and start setting goals and putting plans into place. So under this umbrella, you can see all the different pieces, components of self-determination. So things like decision-making and choice-making, problem-solving. You can see self-awareness and self-knowledge are there. And we talked about that with the disability awareness earlier. Also self-advocacy, which isn't the same thing as self-determination. A lot of times they're said in the same breath. And I just want to mention here that vocational rehabilitation provides instruction and training on self-advocacy. It's one of their pre-employment transition services. So, it's not just on educators or families, although certainly we kind of need it coming from every angle and having instruction and opportunities to practice these skills, but also voc rehab can help. This next question is around executive functioning. So has your student learned skills to assist with organizing, planning, and prioritizing? And that's really important because you can see in the two columns here in high school, and think back to when you were in high school, you have a really sort of rigid schedule. Students are provided with structure in terms of their scheduling. They're at school from 8 to 4, 8 to 2, every single day, Monday through Friday. There are clear expectations on behavior. They're probably hanging on the wall somewhere or in the hallways. When they're planning homework, there are clear deadlines, and typically it's broken down a little bit into smaller chunks. Same with class projects. They're just given a lot of sort of structure and guidance and suggestions. In college, students are responsible for managing their own time. So you get your syllabus at the beginning of the semester, and it's not totally up to the student, but they need to put into place their timelines for getting things done. And that also includes all other parts of your life, whether it's having a part-time job or a full-time job, family responsibilities, the fun stuff. So sometimes that lack of structure and that transition from, knowing where you are and what you're doing from a certain time to a certain time, Monday through Friday, to college, it kind of being more up in the air, is a really hard transition. So taking time in middle and high school to help students start taking responsibility for their time and putting management tools, self-management tools into place will help them immensely. And so some tips for students, and really this is tips for people who are working with students, really present to students life management tools in a positive light. I really like this, that it's really a key to freedom, that when tasks are completed efficiently, that gives them more free time to do whatever they want to do. And then parents, it says a tip for a parent, but I actually think really tip for any adult working with youth. Instead of directive prompting language, like go upstairs and get your backpack, use visualization instead. So ask questions like, if you were standing at the door ready to go to school, what would you have to have with you? And that really helps students engage in planning and take responsible action. The next question relates to computer skills and also assistive technologies that can help with those computer-based tasks. And one pretty major change with the post-secondary environment, college, university, and even other career and technical education, is that it's very computer intensive. So most students bring a laptop or a tablet to class. They're accessing their course materials by downloading them from their learning management system like Canvas or Blackboard. And so just knowing that, off the get-go, that students have to be comfortable using technology, and having access to regular technology is crucial. But then also ensuring that they have assistive technology that can help them too. And then just having this awareness can help them when engaging with the Disability Services Office on campus, computer labs, and libraries, which are very much digital in format now. There's not a lot of paper trails or forms out there. A lot of it's just sort of digital and computer based. So when they're in the K-12 environment, or if they're transitioning to a post-secondary environment, students really need to be building skills in the following areas. Keyboarding. The whole hunt and peck thing doesn't work long term when you're writing a long email or a long paper or a discussion board post. Um, Email. So that email etiquette, how to actually use Microsoft Outlook or Gmail or other types of email. Accessing internet browsers, so knowing the difference between Chrome and Mozilla and the others, and sort of the pros and cons with that. Internet safety, which is, I think we could all benefit from, because spammers are getting, more and more savvy, but particularly people with disabilities can be more at risk for falling victim to those types of scams. And also just proactive things like, updating your firewall and your antivirus and things like that. Also, just basic things like the Microsoft package, Word, Excel, PowerPoint. Those are 3 software that pretty much everyone needs that's working on a computer. in this day and age. And then also those built-in accessibility features that are in the Microsoft and also in other platforms like Google, things like speech to text and text to speech, which are hugely, hugely helpful to most college students, and particularly students that might have a reading challenge. And then finally, have you researched any of those post-secondary options? Like what's out there and what's the best fit for your young person? So that can start very early, middle, and high school. Go back to the IEP. If you're an educator and have access to the IEP, look at some of those post-secondary goals and what type of post-secondary education would help align with those goals. Another reminder about disclosing disability and requesting meeting different eligibility requirements in order to receive appropriate accommodations. So having those discussions while students have an IEP and are preparing for college and other things. So some questions to consider: what options are available to your student? And what this question really gets at is the course of study that a student takes can have implications for the types of post-secondary options available. So just a really sort of general example is think about the admissions requirements for a university. You know, there's GPA, service learning aspects, there's testing requirements. So it's a little bit more competitive depending on the university. And then there's state colleges or community colleges, which are open access. And then there's a lot of other different admissions requirements for career and technical and other types of post-secondary training. And so just knowing what those options are and in your student's course of study. Which options will help your student achieve their post-secondary goal? We already sort of touched on that when talking about the IEP. Thinking about other things like beyond just the academics and getting into college, where would the student attend? Would it be close to home where they're living now? Where would the student live? Would they live on campus or with a relative or, you know, whatnot? Thinking about the best options to accommodate your students' learning needs. And that could even just be also like goodness of fit in terms of the campus. Do you want to go to a big, huge university where you're, you know, 1 in 20 or 30,000, or would a smaller environment be better? And that kind of goes into social integration too. So are there certain clubs or organizations that might help a student or might be of interest to the student? Okay, so we talked about that's sort of the student section. I see something in the chat.
What?
Okay, we had a question. Is it too early to discuss this to
hour and a
middle
half.
school students? That was a question from Susie. Thanks, Susie. I don't think so. I think middle school students, we can start talking
I
about
know, so
that.
everybody's doing an hour and a half and an hour and a half.
If you guys could mute until it's your
2
turn to
hours?
talk, that would be great. So the question, I'm just going to repeat the question. Is it too early to start discussing
I
these
want to say, I mean, since I've been
in
here,
middle
the
school?
subcommittee meetings have been 2 hours. Yeah, but I don't know if it should be that long.
Okay, I think we're good now. All right, so middle school. I don't think it's too early. I think that it really goes along well with, there's a career and education. I think it's career and employment course that is just for middle schoolers, and it's a middle school promotion requirement. And it has a lot of different components, and part of it is it's really focused on career planning, which includes the post-secondary ed component. So that's a great avenue to start thinking and planning in middle school for what post-secondary education does a student need for their career. Thanks for that question. Alrighty, so the next leg of this presentation is preparing parents for college. And so similar to how we started with students, this little slide talks about sort of the differences in the parental role from high school to college. So in high school, parents have access to students' records. In college, actually students have to provide written consent for a parent to have access to their records, and that's due to Ferpa, and we'll talk about that shortly. In high school, the parents attend the IEP or the Section 504 meetings, but in college, students attend the meetings on their own unless they provide parental consent to attend the meetings. In high school, parents may advocate for their child, but in college, that really rests more on the students to self-advocate for themselves. And so we'll talk about a little more about financing and FERPA in this section as well. And before we get into some of that, though, I just want to reiterate, though, that family and parent expectations and support are crucial. There's a lot of studies out there that emphasize this. And I just have a few bullets on how families can support self-determination. So we talked about, remember this slide on the umbrella of self-determination skills. These are just a few ideas to support self-determination at home. And so, you know, just a lot of it has to do with having high expectations, having awareness of the student's strengths, preferences, and needs, and really fostering students their own self-esteem, self-determination, and independence, and providing opportunities to use those skills that were under that self-determination umbrella. And a lot of that boils down to decision-making opportunities. And then on the right side of the slide, you'll see how can families promote post-secondary education. And so the first one we already sort of spoke to a little bit, but understanding how a high school student's course of study, so those courses they're taking, impacts their post-secondary education opportunities and options. Researching and visiting post-secondary education institutions like colleges and universities, exploring the costs and financing options, and discussing disclosure. Okay, so we talked about FERPA. What is FERPA? FERPA is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. It's a federal law that gives parents of students in the K-12 environment certain rights to their child's educational records. And really the purpose is to ensure privacy of educational records and access to the records for parents. But ownership of that data changes and it switches to the students once a student turns 18 or enrolls into a college or university. Like my husband graduated and started college when he was 17. So that once he started at USF, he had his parents didn't any longer have access unless students give consent in writing to give parents access, which is a lot of times a good idea for students with disabilities. And so really the biggest thing here is establishing that communication and the expectations. And that really goes from the family or parents to the youth and also with the college. So just sharing those expectations with your son or daughter about sharing grades and other educational data. Parents of youth with disabilities might want additional details of their students' life. So just having that, what type of information you're looking for, just putting that out there to the college. And it might not be approved, so to speak, but just putting that out there to the student and they have to give consent for that. You can discuss this information with trusted people in your son or daughter's life at the post-secondary institution, and really your son or daughter should be really involved in these conversations. Remember, we don't want to do anything for a student without involving them in that decision making. FERPA doesn't prevent official, like university and college officials, from reporting things when they notice unusual behaviors, but having really open communication and transparent communication between students, family, and college can help encourage that communication. And really just opening that up really helps students also request help when they need it and communicate when there is a problem. So financing post-secondary education, this is like one of the most frequently hit websites on our webpage. So I know it's cost and financing is a huge thing on most people's minds. So I want to first talk about scholarships. In Florida, so the first 3 bullet points, let me back up, are scholarships specific to inclusive post-secondary programs, so programs for students with intellectual disabilities. The first bullet is the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities, FCSUA. They provide student scholarships for students who are attending a Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Program, an FPCTP. They provide scholarships to these types of programs of $7,000 per student per year. They just have to be enrolled in an approved FPCTP. And it's really great because students really don't have to do anything to get these scholarships. It's automatic, and the administrator or the director of the FPCTP program submits the information and works with the Florida Center to get those scholarships for the students. So that's a really great opportunity. And you can find more at that website, including the approved FPCTPs in Florida. So that is Florida specific, but a great opportunity for students with intellectual disabilities in Florida. The next two bullet points are also inclusive post-secondary specific. So Ruby's Rainbow and the O'Neill Tabani Enrichment Fund are both specific to inclusive post-secondary education, but they're national. And then the bottom bullet on the left side is just a webpage. Our webpage, Project 10, has a webpage on scholarships, grants, and financial resources for students with disabilities. So that has like a whole host of different opportunities on that website. On the right side, you'll see federal student aid and other resources. And so students with disabilities are able to apply for the federal student aid, which is through the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, just like any other student. And students who are in a comprehensive transition program, a CTP, are also eligible to get student aid as well and can apply through the FAFSA. They aren't available or able to get student loans, but need-based assistance and work study and things like that are available. And so the website to the FAFSA is listed there, as well as some information for specifically for programs for students with intellectual disabilities. And then I put on our financial planning for post-secondary education, which is kind of a broader resource page. Alrighty, and that does it for my presentation. Were there any questions? I think you can put them in the chat box or unmute. Oh, Eric had asked, what is your website? And it's project1010.info. And I'll put it in the chat box in just a moment. I can't talk and type at the same time. And Maria had reiterated that the PowerPoint will be sent out to everyone, and the links in there are clickable, so you can, click through them at your convenience. There's also a resource slide deck that I think will be shared too, and it's by topic. So, each one of these slides could have had like 5 slides to go along with it, or even probably like an hour presentation on each. So we put together a pretty comprehensive slide deck of resources that will be shared for everyone who attended today. Okay, Veronica had a question. Also, hey, Veronica, does receiving a standard diploma with access impact the student's ability to access any type of post-secondary education opportunities? That's a really good question. So yes, it does. So a student that is receiving, has worked towards a standard diploma, but via access points or access curriculum. So that student, that has a lot of impact, a lot of implications for post-secondary options. So that would be a student with a significant cognitive disability, and it was an IEP decision. Parents were involved in switching that student to an access course or alternative assessment. And so that's a big deal, in the K-12 level. And so essentially, I don't want to make a big blanket statement, but so if a student has that they've taken most of their high school courses, but via access points, that would be sort of a indicator that they're not university bound, or really like pre-college material necessarily, but there are programs for students with intellectual disabilities, inclusive post-secondary education. And so there are a number of those programs in Florida, I think about 20 or 21. And those programs, almost all, take students that have, were students that are on access points. But I'm also not saying students that have took their curriculum on access points in high school can also enroll in a open access state college or not state college, community college or state college. So it's kind of like you have to check the admissions requirements for whatever institution you're interested in. That's a really good question. Nancy Torres asked, what is the situation with students using McKay and attending private schools? And that's one I don't have an answer to. That might be something we'll have to do some research in and get back to you on. I'm going to write that one down. Unless somebody else on the call knows about the McKay and private schools. I do know years ago, University of North Florida did accept McKay scholarship, but and they're affiliated with a private school. But other than that, that's all I know about that. We'd have to check and follow up on that.
Okay. Good, good, good. Enjoy.
And I'll also put up my contact information as you're thinking if there's any other questions.
Hi, this is Maria Piewanski, and Danny, thank you so much. You have so much information and so much knowledge. And I guess one of the things that we were wondering was, from all of you, are there things that you any tips that Danny has shared that you think like I could try that tomorrow, or have you had some experience trying something that's been successful that Danny has talked about? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to back up a minute. Danny, it looks like you have another question.
Oh, cool. Thanks, Kathy. Okay, so Kathy said, when you say a course can't be modified, are institutions developing special content for students with disabilities? I have a clarifying question there. Well, when you say students with disabilities, do you mean like through an inclusive post-secondary program with students with intellectual disabilities? And while we're waiting on that, so yeah, in post-secondary ed, courses can't be modified, and standards and the content and curriculum cannot be modified. With inclusive post-secondary programs, some, not all, every program sort of handles this differently. And I'll just speak to how we're doing it at UMatter and how we've done it before. So students have, and this is just sort of program by program, but I'll give an example. So students have, are auditing a course, so they're not receiving a grade. So that is why we're able to, I don't really want to say modify, but what we do is have a learning contract per course, per student, individualized to that student, where a person from our team works with the student and the professor to modify the syllabus to outline some concrete expectations for that student. And the only reason that is able to be done is because the student is auditing the course, so they're not taking it for credit. And it is something, it's sort of that wraparound support that we coordinate as part of our program. And so we're still setting rigorous expectations, but attainable expectations for our students. And also our students are non-degree seeking. So that's sort of why we're able to do that. But other programs handle it differently. Some students in inclusive post-secondary programs do take college courses for credit. And so modifications would not be possible.
I hate to break in. I'm blind and I can't use the text function very well. Is it okay if I add something?
Yes, for sure.
I just want to stress a couple of things. First of all, FERPA is a records law, and I'm the director of the Disability Resource Center at Flagler College. It's a records law, so it's not a decision-making law. Your student, it would have to make decisions with your assistance. That's okay, but you cannot make decisions for them without their permission. And if you have custody of an adult, meaning that they have an intellectual disability and you've gone through the process of custody, then you can make higher ed decisions for the student. So it's my advice that parents who need that kind of protection for their student, that they proceed in that direction. The third thing I just really want to add quickly is it is the responsibility of the Disability Services, Disability Resource Center, the college, to arbitrate with the faculty. So if a student needs advocacy, needs an accommodation, or needs to communicate with their faculty to avoid the conflict of the faculty's power over the student, their advocate is in the Disability Service Office, and they can work with the faculty to arbitrate should the faculty refuse or deny a request for an accommodation. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We really appreciate your perspective.
Any further comments or questions for Danny? We took, well, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Danny, I hope you get a chance to take some big, long, deep breaths.
Yes.
Thank you. That was just a lot of information, and we really appreciate you actually keeping the time and covering everything. Some of the discussion session, because we're really hoping this series will be a catalyst for more of a conversation around these issues and the information that Danny just presented, and that people can actually enhance what they're doing or learn a new practice or strategy that they'd like to implement. And that's one of the first questions we have. Was there anything that Danny covered or made you think of that you'd like to try to implement in the next few weeks? Okay. I'm not seeing anything in the chat room, but my chat might not be working well. Maria or Jamie, do you?
There isn't a comment yet for this question.
Okay, thank you. Well, let's go through the rest of the other three questions and see if some resonate for you. I mean, it was really clear from the research that we did do that students with intellectual and other developmental disabilities are getting to college but are very unprepared, especially in the foundational or executive functioning skills that Danny did mention. So the question is, what can we do more in partnership with one another, which is exciting to see people from higher education, K-12, and voc rehab on this session, because one of the key things is getting people to work together and to collaborate. when I first started in this area, what we used to hear from higher ed and K-12 and VRs, everybody's pointing the finger at each other. And that just doesn't help us or help the student, more importantly. So, it's really important to think about now, how could students be better prepared for when they do get to college, especially now that students with intellectual and developmental disabilities there's a new pathway into college. But we hear loud and clear that students aren't prepared. Some of it is students often, and I'm not speaking just of Florida now, I'm talking nationally, are tracked when they get into high school, are often tracked into life skills classes or independent living skills. So they're not learning academic content, because somehow especially when you turn age 18, it appears that you no longer are, if you have a label of intellectual or developmental disability, you're often tracked into non-academic. All learning like that, academic stops. So students really need more typical academic and other types of skill building around, especially around the executive or soft skills. Does any of the information presented align with what you experienced?
Hi, this is Phil again. I'm really, really glad to see that you're doing planning, setting plans. Sorry, my phone is reading the text message. So in my view, I think in that planning process, setting first a long-term goal that the student is going to buy into, that sets short-term goals that you can then use as a stimulus and reward when they do well, and truly understanding the credit load and credit balance that the student can handle, the kinds of classes that they can take that uses first one of their strengths in an academic area and works on one of the areas in which they need improvement. And balancing these areas along with the number of classes that they're going to take truly can help the student to understand academic and without academic balance. Taking a music theory class with a math class rather than two math component classes or two heavy writing classes. I think setting these goals ahead of time, getting buy-in, and having the student understand what the object of the goal is going to be is truly important.
Thank you, Philip.
Deborah, this is Drew.
Drew, hey.
I just wanted to share, at the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities, the information that's just been shared is so on target, because a lot of students are not prepared for post-secondary, because although it has been around for a while, there's still a lot of students and families and even educators that just aren't thinking that way. And so we funded college and career transition clubs throughout the state of Florida, and it's an inclusive club with students with intellectual disabilities, students with other disabilities, and students without disabilities to do college exploration, to look at the application requirements to enter a program. And that's for all students. And so I think that just maybe more, just like this webinar today, the more that we can share this information with more people so that everyone knows that there are opportunities for students. And as those numbers of opportunities increase, I'm just hoping that we can some way speed the process up, because it's never quite as fast as we want it to be for for the K-12 system to really have all students ready for post-secondary, including students with intellectual disabilities.
Thank you for sharing that, Drew. The concept of those transition clubs, am I miscategorizing them?
No, we call them college and career transition clubs.
Okay, I think it's fabulous. I talk about that when I'm in other states. Well, that's been quite some time now, not traveling, but on webinars or other discussions. So it's a fabulous resource. And helps students who historically haven't been told that college is an option for them. So I just think it's great. It certainly fits with our topic today in terms of how can students and families be better prepared.
Right.
What else do we need to include in this type of discussion we're having?
If you want to make a systemic change, then I would recommend that as part of your grant, you start to talk to special education students who are going to be special educators. The more they understand what you're trying to achieve, the more they can put that into their own curriculum. So talking to faculty who teach special education, talking to institutions that have education colleges and that specialize in special education would really, really start to do a systemic change to the attitudinal barriers of students with intellectual and developmental disabilities.
Thank you, Philip. We totally agree. Maria Payawansky, who's part of our project team, is the principal investigator for personnel preparation grant through the Office of Special Ed Programs at the university. And she's trains transition leaders who are coming from school districts to learn more about transition and all the requirements. So we practice what you're suggesting. I think it's critical because I remember in preparation for that grant, we did a lot of research and found that the majority of personnel preparation for special education teachers in particular was one course in terms of transition. So it's a great need. Anything else we need to include in this as we talk about it and think about it?
Danny, this is Maria, and I just want to say, as a person who is teaching transition courses, two things that I heard you say today that I really do know are so important. One is really teaching syllabus. It's such a loaded term, but there is so much that students have to understand to use a syllabus. And it's not just reading it, but it's really understanding it and having the executive function skills to follow it. So I think that's a really important thing that you say. It's very concrete and also like really important. And the other thing is really helping students make that adjustment to the kind of technology that they need to use in college that they're not likely using, even in this COVID period right now. They may not be using the same technology in high school that they will need in college. So I appreciate those two strategies in particular that you mentioned.
Thanks, Maria. Yeah, I think those are, really good points. And I really like how you broke down some of those aspects of the syllabus that we don't really think about that, to help translate that knowledge, how to read them and how to prepare and the backward planning that it takes to, know how much time you need to submit some of your big assignments.
Okay, I'm going to take the last 5 minutes and turn this over to Jamie. Let me see if I can, there's a terrible storm here right now, or winds. So I'm going to shut my video off. And
That's me.
when I see the word evaluation, I know it's my turn.
That's you.
Hi, everyone. Jamie Timmons here. I just wanted to ask everyone to just hold for a second in terms of typing in the chat. I'm posting a link right now in the chat. And what I would like to ask is that if people could take a couple of minutes, we say it takes 5 minutes, but it really takes about 2 or 3 minutes to provide us with your feedback. We're very interested at Think College and at the Florida DD Council in terms of how these speaker series will impact your day-to-day work. So I'm going to just wait for a moment and have people click on that link in the chat and begin to fill out the quick evaluation. And then as soon as those start rolling in, we'll do a quick wrap up and we can talk about how I can get people's certificates out to folks. And as people are filling out the survey, for those of you who have joined today, either by phone or perhaps using an iPad or some other way that your name would not come up in the participant list, if after you complete the evaluation, you could put your name in the chat box. I've direct thanks to those of you who messaged me throughout the meeting. This way I can have an accurate count of everybody who's participated. And thank you. Our evaluations are starting to come in already. And thank you to those of you who responded to me in the chat with your names, if your names are not showing up on the participant list.
Someone's getting lots of email.
Yes. I have a new nifty mechanism that I get a direct notification for each evaluation submitted. So here they come.
Oh, that's you. Okay, great.
Yep, that's me.
I want to echo what Jamie has said regarding the evaluation. It's really going to help us to tailor these discussions in a way, hopefully, that will be useful to you all.
And I'm going to just give it another minute, and then what I will do is maybe hand it back to you, Deborah, because my email is now dinging and donging to do the final wrap up. I have received in the participant list, I think I've documented everybody who has participated along with their email addresses. So we would be able to follow up with certificates for folks. But if you want to do the wrap up, I'm good on my end.
Okay, great. And thank you all for doing the evaluations. It sounded like we got a fair number, so that's exciting too. As I mentioned in the opening, we have developed 2 related online modules. One is how to better prepare students, the topic we had today, and the second one is on what supports are available for students with intellectual and developmental disabilities once they enter into college. So that this is a companion piece to that. And we're hoping to generate more activity related to these topics and discussion. So those modules are there right now. The Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities are programming those, and they will live on the Florida Center's website. So we're very grateful for their openness and willingness to host these modules. And then the next speaker's session is, as you can see listed here on the slide, is Monday, January 11th at 2 p.m. And the topic is looking at promoting inclusive post-secondary education options with stakeholders, including students, families, IEP team members, and adult service folks. So we hope you will be returning for the second one. And if you could help us get the word out that these are available to your colleagues, that would be super. Okay, I think there's. Now we want to again thank you all for participating. And if you have any questions or concerns, want additional information, I think Danny referred to a resource, a series of slides on resources that accompany her comments. We will also be sending that out with the slide deck that was reviewed today. But I would encourage you to contact Jamie Timmons, who just spoke on the evaluation piece, and she's the project coordinator. Thank you all.